The following story is also available as a read-only version. Check the link in the description if you're interested. Some people thought flying a bus was an easy job. It was anything but. The engines weren't even the problem. They were heavy-duty American craftsmanship, powerful as dragons and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. Horace couldn't recall a single delay to his commands, and they took even the harshest hairpins and emergency reversals without so much as a wince. It wasn't the gravity mesh either, though that one did provide difficulties for some cadets. Smiling, Horace remembered overdriving the energy input on his first training flight, making the mesh howl beneath his feet, and the wings strain under the sudden upward force. These days, handling it was second nature to him. The mesh was as responsive as the engines, if not more so. No, the real issue with flying a bus was the people. His father had driven passengers around at the ground level back in his heyday, and he had some crazy stories to tell. None of them compared to the strange occurrences Horace witnessed every week. There was something about being trapped in a metal box high up in the sky that made people go mad. It didn't happen on large planes, as far as he could tell, and Horace believed that it had to do with the confinement. Planes were large enough for cocktail bars and swimming pools. In a bus, people had seats. That was it. He was on Heiston Plateau, waiting for passengers to leave as others boarded. Horace loved these skyscraper platforms. They were easy to land and depart from, and they had ticket boys handling the passengers. Things always went smooth up here. It was a group of businessmen that caught his eye, laid back, laughing, clad in expensive suits, carrying suitcases. Most of them had salt and pepper hair, though there were a few silver foxes among them. They looked unreal, like actors from a movie, not the exhausted office drones he shipped across the skies every day. They were executives, cream of the crop, wealthy enough to employ their own chauffeurs. Why they were taking the bus, Horace could only guess. The chaos began when they opened a bottle of champagne. Drinking a few drops on the bus was no problem, but popping a cork in a tin can was dangerous business. "Gentlemen, please contain yourselves. Don't throw things on the bus," he spoke into the intercom. A dismissive yeah was all he got in response, but they didn't pop any more corks. Of course, they only had one bottle of champagne with them, so they couldn't have done it again if they wanted to. Things went messy after Horace took off from South Garden Square, where a group of young, attractive girls joined them. College students, from the look of them, and dressed in the promiscuous manner the youngsters of today had chosen to rebel with. Modest compared to the mint of people Horace encountered during his night shifts. The executives caught sight of them immediately, lions locking onto a herd of gazelles. At first there was some jokes, a few naughty compliments. The girls were giggling, enjoying the attention. Horace had better things to do. The spaces in this section of Midtown were narrow, and always crowded at this hour of the afternoon. He passed beneath a suspension bridge stretched between two buildings, part of the Skybridge network for pedestrians and automobiles. A long-range triple-decker bus and a taxi passed too close below him. Shaking his head, Horace looked in the mirror to see the executives crowding the girls. This wasn't anything unusual per se, but the students did look a little uncomfortable at the older men's physical advances. Horace decided to let it rest for now. He wasn't out of Midtown yet, and the next stop required him to slot into the middle of a skyscraper. It wasn't difficult, but it required concentration. After he landed, some people got out, others got in, but both the girls and the suits stayed. Halfway to the next stop, one of the students shouted, "Stop it!" at one of the silver foxes, and it wasn't the playful kind of rejection. "You never been with an older man before," the executive said in response. I got money, and I know how to show you a good time. Experience and all that. His friends laughed. Is everything okay back there? Asked Horace through the intercom. Yeah, busboy, everything is fine. Get back to flying, the executive yelled. Actually, I feel very uncomfortable back here, sir, the girl who had just been accosted said. I've asked them to go away, but they won't listen. Gentlemen, please do leave those young ladies alone, Horace demanded. Or what? Asked the senior executive, getting to his feet. Cockiness on his face, he walked up to the cockpit. What are you gonna do? Kick us off the bus? Sir, if you don't calm down and return to your seat, that is what I'll have to do, Horace responded, keeping an eye on the airspace in front of him. Why don't we throw you out instead? The executive said. His friends had come to the front now, and Horace had to slightly rebalance the mesh to accommodate for the sudden shift in weight. You hear me, busboy? Why don't you leave? We own your company, after all. Horace shook his head, frowning. Buses are owned by the city. You don't look like politicians to me. The executives broke out into laughter. No, you dumbass. They don't anymore. We signed the deal 3 hours ago. You boys are getting privatized, and we get to be your owners. Why do you think we're even on this shitbird in the first place? Horace shook his head with confusion. Gentlemen, please sit down, or I will be forced to perform an emergency landing to remove you from the bus, which will result in a fine for you. They laughed again. This clearly hadn't been their first bottle of champagne that day. Horace noted in the corner of his eye that one of them had stepped a little too close to the door, but he was too focused on navigating to do anything about it. First order of business, the lead executive said, you're fired. And seeing as you're on the bus without a ticket, I'll have to ask you to step off the vehicle. Horace had no idea how the junior executive knew how to perform a mid-flight emergency door opening, but he did, and the doors opened. Reflexively, Horace hit the close doors button, but it did not work as was intended. Come on, step off, the senior executive said. I won't repeat myself. There was a click, followed by silence. Horace turned to see a gun in the man's hand. Come on, busboy, you know how to fly. His friends had stopped laughing the moment the executive pulled the firearm. They looked a bit nervous now, unsure if following their ringleader was such a good idea, but unwilling to break from the group. Horace slowed the bus. The emergency lights were already blinking, signaling to other pilots that something was wrong. Are you sure this is a good idea, Roy? One of the younger executives asked. You want to jump out with him, Glover? Was the response. You're a weakling. That's why you're never going to go anywhere on your own. Be glad I pulled you up this far. Horace spoke slowly, trying to stay calm. Please, sir, put down the weapon. You do not know how to operate this vehicle. There was a twitch of doubt on the man's face, his rational mind pointing out the stupidity of what he was currently doing. Instead of backing off, he decided to double down. You want to test me, arsehole? I'll figure it out. Can't be that difficult if you can do it. He held the gun closer to Horace's back. Come on now, get up, busboy. His next moves would be crucial, Horace knew. He was in a lower air lane, going slow. Other vehicles were giving him a wide berth. He rose, stepped aside, still facing forward, and slowly turned sideways toward the door. Yeah, that's my busboy. Now get down there. Horace moved forward, turned mid-step, spun away, and grabbed the man's hand. A shot discharged. The window shattered. The executive had a shocked expression on his face as Horace ripped his gun away and punched him in the mouth. He fell backward into the other executives, who moved around in a panic, pushing each other away. One of them screamed, It was the junior who opened the door. He'd fallen out and was holding onto the bottom step with one hand. His screams of terror would haunt Horace for the rest of his life. "Hold him down," Horace commanded the other executives, referring to their pack leader, and jumped down to the door to grab a hold of the man's arm. It was too late. He slipped off before Horace could grab a hold of him, his howls of terror disappearing into the chasm of skyscrapers. Horace had no time for shock. With the presence of mind of a veteran soldier, he undid the security lock, jumped back into the driver's seat, and closed the door. The old executive's gun sat on the dashboard, sliding back and forth, but kept inside by the small gap between it and the blown-out window. Horace grabbed it as he accelerated and found a place for his emergency landing. "Fuck! Let go of me!" the senior executive shouted behind him, as he presumably realized how much he'd just destroyed his own life. Horace set the bus down gently on the terrace of a high-rise, keeping the mesh running to reduce the vehicle's weight. The police arrived soon after and arrested the executive. The other passengers were evacuated onto another emergency bus. As Horace lifted off to fly his own vehicle to the depot, he was unsure if what had just happened was real or not. He was not fired after all. If you liked this story and would like to hear more, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. A new short story is uploaded every Wednesday, and there will occasionally be another one in between if I find the time. Thank you very much for listening and have a great day.